colonial chains. So already early in the freedom movements, yes, in the freedom movements, defiant efforts were made to counter the information disseminated by colonial governments through these news agencies. And the press and other media, the development of the vernacular press and alternative forms of news distribution, such as small magazines, pamphlets, letters, which were often handwritten. And we had street plays and public meetings. They played a very vital role in spreading the message of independence. So several leading nationalist leaders were active journalists then. So once independence was won, the struggle became part of the effort to follow the path of uh, alignment and self-reliant development. So indeed, information was valued then, and from the beginning, as a public resource and a social good linked to development. These, transnational agencies are, or these multinational agencies, which were, therefore replaced by national agencies, and not all of them under direct government control. Though in most cases subsidized, they were subsidized by the new governments then. So the transnational, they did not go gracefully. And then Reuters, for instance, they refused to let go of its profitable market in India until the Prime Minister himself forced it to withdraw. So in some other countries like Nigeria, Ghana, and the Caribbean, Reuters managers were retained to help establish the national news agencies in those countries. And furthermore, journalists of some developing countries were sent to the West for training. So others were offered, attachments at the BBC and other Western broadcasting organizations. So these efforts resulted in the entrenchment of Western and transnational news values in the press, of these developing countries, uh, which in turn they were helping to extend the dominance of the transnational news agencies long after the holdover managers, and experts have been replaced by the native journalists. Then. So there were new regional alliances. Meanwhile, governments of the developing countries began to form new alliances, keeping clear of the power blocks. Okay, so the non-aligned movement, which is also known as NAM, it came into existence in the year 1961 with 25 member countries. So today it has one or two members, and in 1963, the independent nations of the African continent came together to form the Organization of African Unity, which is also known as OAU. And 2 years later, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, that is known as ASEAN countries, that is ASEAN. They brought together Indonesia, the Philippines, Malaysia, Singapore, and Thailand in a regional alliance. So the Organization of American States, which is also known as OAS, was formed in the Western Hemisphere. So of all these, the most significant was the non-aligned movement, and its influence was increasingly felt in the United Nations as well. So during the late 1960s and the early 1970s, the non-aligned nations, they banded together to fight the international economic order, which offered unfair and unequal trade advantage to these developed or richer nations. Okay, so they argued that free trade was, in reality, a one-way trade from north to south, and then free flow of information likewise was regarded as a one-way flow of news and information, again from north to south. So they further argued that political freedom without economic and cultural freedom was meaningless. So a de facto colonialism prevailed during that time, and then national and cultural identities were under threat of extinction. So their mass media were, mostly they were ruled, or what we can say is dominated by material from the West, like films from Hollywood, then TV serials from the networks, or popular music from the multinational record companies, and news in all media from the transnational news agencies. Okay. So direct broadcasting was seen as an ultimate threat to the national and cultural identity at that time. So the flow was free, all right, okay, but what we can say is there was no equity or balance in it. So the non-aligned countries, therefore sought to rewrite the United Nations Charter, which had been adopted at a time when most of the developing world was under colonial rule. So they felt that the charter reflected colonial interests and values, and which were, reluctant to the free, non-aligned countries. So then, then comes the role of UNESCO, where the resentment about this obvious imbalance gave rise to speculation about its causes. So there was a scholar, Herbert Siller. He contends, that the United States advocacy of the free flow of information was necessitated by imperialistic designs, and then corporate needs of business and trade, and the Cold War atmosphere, so which were prevailing at that time. So he argues that the historical coincidence of the imperial, dependency of the United States and its advocacy of the policy of free flow of information is not fruitful. So he suggested that the genesis and the extension of the doctrine, that is which was roughly continuous with a brief and hectic interval of US global hegemony. US used to play a dominant role, and then it was also seen as needed to maintain the Cold War environment. So as early as 1948, the United States and its allies had the major influence in drawing up the UN Declaration of Human Rights. So, Article 19 of the Declaration stated that everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression, okay, and to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas through any medium and regardless of frontiers. So, news agencies thus, had an unimpeded rights to collect and distribute news and information, so regardless of national frontiers. But in reality, the right could not be, it could only be extended by the transnational news agencies, because for they alone had the resources and technology and the trained personnel to do so. Okay, so then the interest of UNESCO in the communication field goes back, to the early 1950s era, because it derives from UNESCO's 1945 charter, which underscores the principles of the free flow of information, and the pursuit of objective was truth. So UNESCO carried out, its first study of news flow in the year 1953. It was a comparative study of 7 major dailies of the world, which included a survey of the structure and operations of news agencies. Okay. Then 3 years later, a second study focused on the problems of transmitting press messages. So thus, by the early 1960s, UNESCO had come to identify the major Western news agencies as one of the vital factors in the flow of information. So UNESCO stepped up, its communication activities with sponsorship of regional news agencies. Okay, then a UNESCO-sponsored conference in Bangkok in the year 1961 led to the creation of the Organization of Asian News Agencies, that is known as OANA. And then again in the year 1962, a similar conference recommended the establishment of a news agency from Latin American countries. Okay. So again, there was a conference in Tunis in 1963 where they proposed the creation of a union of African news agencies also. So these activities attracted little attention or controversy in the West at that time. Then again in the year 1970, however, the General Conference of UNESCO, they issued a call to examine communication policies. So this, drew severe criticism from the United States and its allies in Europe. Okay. Then the spectacle of, direct satellite broadcasting, seemed to some governments to pose the ultimate threat to cultural independence. So again, in 1972, a Soviet-sponsored resolution, it was a declaration of guiding principle for the use of satellite broadcasting for the free flow of information, and also the extension of education and the development of cultural exchanges. It was adopted by UNESCO members, and a related General Assembly resolution was formed to formulate, principles governing direct satellite broadcasting. And it also received, overwhelming approval at that time. So only the United States consistently opposed this resolution because their dominance was a threat. Then meanwhile, the non-aligned nations had drawn up a charter for a new international economic order, which is known as NIEO, which was approved at a special session of the UN General Assembly in the year May 1974. Then we have this New World Information and Communication Order, which is known as NWICO, was seen by them as integral part to new international economic order. So the Non-Alignment Summit conference in Algeria in 1973 made it clear that the transformation of the international economic system required that non-aligned nations take concerted action in the field of mass communication, okay, in order to promote a greater interchange of ideas among themselves. So, thus it was at the Algiers meeting, that the issue first surfaced as one of the major international concerns. So, however, the thrust of the resolution adopted was towards achieving a free flow of information among the non-aligned countries. Okay, so this was the backdrop which we discussed in the earlier classes. Okay, about New World Information Communication Order. So, any doubts still here about the background? About the backdrop of global communication? How it all started? Clear? This is just a repetition of the last classes. Any doubts here? If you have any doubts, please unmute and you can ask. Okay, so this is just a revision of the last classes which we discussed. So, as we discussed about this non-aligned group of 77 member countries, they felt, that the Western agencies were using their vast resources to carry out a propaganda war against the, demands of these countries about NIEU and New World Information Communication Order and New International Economic Order. So, the Western countries' attitude towards the free trade, which the non-aligned countries labeled pure neo-colonialism. Okay, it was argued that the West persisted in regarding information as just another commodity to be traded for profit without regard to its cultural implications. So they just regarded communication as a commodity, and they wanted it to use for their profits. So they were sidelining the they were avoiding the cultural implications, they were ignoring all those cultural implications which these nations would pose as a threat to the countries, the developing countries. Then we have this McBride report. Okay, so the McBride report, it says that the strengthening voice of these non-aligned nations in the United Nations, it led to the establishment of an international commission. Okay, for the study of communication problems by UNESCO. As I said earlier, that UNESCO carried out a study and carried out a study on the communication problems faced by these transactional news agencies. So again they formed a commission in the year 1977, and under the leadership of the Irish diplomat Sean McBride. Okay, so he headed this commission, and the mission of this commission was to do a thorough analysis of world communication problems, all the communication problems throughout the world, with special stress on the international implications of the modern media, the impact of modern media at that time on the communication uh, you know problems. They analyzed it thoroughly, and then the McBride report was published under the title Many Voices, One World in the year 1980. Okay, so the report which was studied by the McBride Commission, was published in the year 1980 with the title Many Voices, One Word. So, although it's not an expression of UNESCO's official position, but the report, it served to define the issues underlying the debate. Okay, the commission members, it were the members were very prominent media personalities from varying national and ideological background, and then they produced a text, but not it was not a consensus, but the report's uneven style reflects its unique character. I'll discuss like what points were discussed in that report. But the new world of the new world, which in the new world information communication order, it means is the it's the one that is brought into being by the newly gained independent countries at that time, of more than 80 nations since the end of the Second World War. And although other designations were already in use, such as New International Information and Communication Order, that is NIICO, the 1978 UNESCO and UN General Assembly resolutions agreed, that the goal they envisaged was a the term new, more just and more efficient world information and communication order. So that's why the report is titled as New World Information and Communication Order. Okay, because they wanted to establish a new world with a balanced and free flow of communication. So this report, it gives a full airing to the many complaints of the non-aligned nations about the defects in the prevailing system of international news flow, such as the general neglect of news of the summit conferences and other activities of the non-aligned movement. On the other hand, it does not neglect to present legitimate Western fears, like a warning in several places. For example, that declaration defining the responsibilities of journalists, or calling for the licensing, or even saying that the rights and freedom should be given special consideration. These all contain the danger of placing undue restrictions on their work. So while seeing some problems in the kinds of news distributed by the transnational agencies, the report also notes that they provide reliable news which cannot be obtained from other sources. Okay, and many of their deficiencies are offset by a growing capacity in developing countries to make appropriate critical selection of news coming from the abroad. So much responsibility both for the failure to use diverse sources and for distorting acts of gatekeeping, it lies with local editors. But many efforts to establish a truly two-way flow of news, um, it's acknowledged to have been made in recent years. Okay, any doubt? Okay. See, neither the McBride report nor the General Declaration, embodying the New World Information Communication Order, drawn up by the UNESCO in 1978, it was it doesn't fully pleased anyone. But even the, minimal unity manifested in these, unsatisfactory compromises, we can say, it was a relief for those countries. And in view of the heated debate which had preceded them, because United Nations, as I said, US was against this you know report. So although many disparities between developed and non-aligned countries still exist even today, and many basic issues in the debate have not been resolved till now, but other authorities claim that it promoted some improvements in the coverage of non-aligned countries by Western media. They say, okay, so the training and development have been slow in many countries, we can say, but a few centers for training have been built, and funding have been supplied. Then technological changes have reduced the cost of news transmission to a great extent, we can say. Then high newsprint costs have hampered newspaper growth in many countries, but the spread of radio, television, and the internet, we can say the mobile, has more than compensated for a decline in newspapers. And interest in communication development has shifted its focus from mass media to telecommunication now, which many have suddenly they thought that it must be at the core of broad spectrum development planning. So now again then came the concept of free flow. Like, what is the difference between the free flow and free and balanced flow of information? See, many observers in the non-aligned nations, nevertheless, they see the fundamental problem in news flows. It's, as I said, it's still unresolved. But the debate, as they interpret it, it's not simply between the, proponents of free flow and those arguing for a free and balanced flow of information across borders. It's rather between a diverse approaches to news and news flows, how we approach the concept of news and the flow of news, which have their roots in, distinct social philosophies and culture. Because cultural dominance, culture also plays a vital role in the, dissemination of information and acceptance of these information. Then, as we said, as these non-aligned countries, they perceive the situation, the patterns of news flow as they exist today. It's determined by a, section of transnational news agencies. Transnational news agencies are these multinational news agencies or international news agencies, which are still dominating. And then they pass on they embodies the political, economic, and cultural interest in the Western blocs. So they pass on the information, they pass on the news which is in favor or which is critical to the Western countries. They pass on those cultural and political and economic interests of the Western blocs. Then the the free flow of information which they defined is, in fact, we can say unidirectional and vertical, just from north to south for the most part, because news about the south that is transmitted around the world presents a distorted picture, we can say, because for it is collected and processed with a Western audience and readership in mind. Okay, neglecting the other parts of the world. So what is more comprehensive here is that the nations of the south, which have different communication needs and interests, are fed similarly distorted images. Okay, like they have to constantly, they keep on receiving the messages from the west, ignoring the their cultural impediments, or their cultural background, the language, or the what we say, their ethnicity. So whatever news or whatever information is being presented to these countries is in distorted form, we can say. Any doubt till here? Understood? See, furthermore, we can say, news about the South is gathered and processed by Western journalists, few of whom, possess an in-depth understanding of the cultural, social, and political, those of developing countries. So we have this foreign correspondents, right? So foreign correspondents and special correspondents are, based in the national capitals of the developed world and report, with authority and expertise on a host of subjects, right? So they are no more than, what we can say as, we can define a term parachute journalist means, for example, they will report whatever knowledge they have of that particular capital city, ignoring the other parts, other cities of the particular country. For example, we can say war correspondents in Iraq and Afghanistan, they who caused it up to the invading army commanders and sought their protection, have come to be called as embedded journalists. This is a new term, embedded journalists. So this the result we can say is that the images of these developing countries, thus disseminated, are distorted and often superficial. Okay, so with the emphasis on poverty, or we can say natural calamities like flood and other disasters, generally presented as, exceptional events without a context, actually. So thus the philosophy of news, which is given by these transnational news agencies, as exceptional events and exceptional people, and they also look as as a commodity for the market. So it's it's an alien, we can say. It's like an alien to the philosophy of non-aligned countries, which see news as development process, as fulfilling social, political, economic, and cultural needs of the people. So this was the backdrop of the formation of new world and information communication order. Okay, any doubt here? Okay, then we have this international news agencies, right? There are so what is the news agency actually? A news agency, according to UNESCO definition, it's an undertaking, whose principal objective, or whatever its a legal form, is to gather news and news material of which the sole purpose is to express or present facts and to distribute this to a group of news enterprises, and in exceptional circumstances to private individuals. Okay, so news agencies are organizations, agencies where they collect, gather information and disseminate it to the public, either by individually or to the news channels. Okay, so in the new millennium, what we can say, such a definition of news agencies, sound it really is sound as outdated, right? So transnational news agencies are international news agencies. Okay, so these national agencies today are large corporations, making their profits largely from the sale of financial and market data they provide it to clients around the world. Okay, and the commercial clients, for they outnumber news enterprises because they have their vested interest in those data, in those share of news, financial news. So further, the kind of facts they present are highly selective, of primary interest to the world of business and commerce in the West, and thus it's they are in no way a complete and impartial, we can say. So we can say that the services the agencies provide are not just text, but it also relate to audio, video, photography, and all kinds of data, like survey. So all these things, and then the business of some national agencies too has grown, and it has expanded through diversification. Okay, then there are some major transnational news agencies which continue to be the big four. That is the Reuters of Britain, AP, Associated Press of the United States of America. Then we have AFP, Agency France Press, and then we have UPI, United Press International, and it's from United States. So though the last has lost what we can say, UPI has lost much of its international market since the late 80s, except in South America. Other large transnational news agencies include, we have DPA from Germany, then we have MENA, that is Middle East News Agencies of Egypt, and then we have Reuters TV and APTN, also Associated Press Television News. They are the television wings of the agencies, of these above agencies. Okay, and European News Exchange, EVN. This is a 66-member consortium of public broadcasters, and it is yet another major player in television news, serving European news and the Pan-European television channel, and also the English, French, German, Italian, and Spanish broadcasters, as well as broadcasting channels around the world. Okay, so EVNs exchange with the regional broadcasting consortia, like we have Arab Vision, Afrovision, Carib Vision, Asia Vision. This is, largely they are one way. They, provide the news information only one way. Then there are some major financial business news agencies like Reuters, then Bloomberg Information Service. We have Bridge Information Systems. Okay, so these are some of the international news agencies. Then we have Thomson Reuters in India. So Thomson Reuters, they has set up shop in a big way in the cities of New Delhi and Bangalore, with a staff of over 3,000, and it has taken a 26% stake in news News Now, the television news joint venture with the Times of India, and a 41% stake in Asia News Venture, and with Asia News International as well, that is ANI. And Reuters has launched a web portal, uh, www.reuters.co.in. This is their website, and on which news videos from News Now and ANI they feature regularly. And besides Reuters India, it has its collaboration with the Maharashtra government, and it established Reuters Market Live, that is RML, to provide timely information to farmers in rural areas of the state. So Reuters' other ventures include, it's a blog syndication network, and at the time of in that what we can say, its most profitable market was India during the time of independence, and it has now returned with a vengeance to reclaim that territory in India. So the post-millennium history of the news agency business has been quietly rewritten by Reuters India. It's very famous and reliable news network of India. Then we have, some challenging these transnational dominance. We have regional news exchanges, which were started in the 1980s, to counter the dominance of the big four. Okay, the big four news agencies which we discussed. So these included, the regional news exchanges included the non-aligned news agency pool, that is known as NANAP, and the transnational news agency, it was founded by both developed and developing countries, and it operated by all participating countries. Okay, then any doubt till here about international news agencies? Okay, then an international news agency, which was established recently and of interest to Indian newspapers, is the IANS, that is India Abroad News Service, and its headquarters in New York. But none of these has made the slightest dent in the international news business. They are not as famous as those big four news agencies. But the biggest challenge, perhaps, to Western dominance of international news has come from the tiny Gulf kingdom of Qatar. Like we have this Al Jazeera network, right? Al Jazeera, then it's an independent Arabic television channel launched in the year 1996 in Qatar's capital Doha, with assistance from the Emir of Qatar, has covered the invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq, as also as the Israeli occupations of Palestinian territories, and the invasion of Lebanese, with a perspective that it has drawn from the Western media, terming it propagandistic and supportive of Al Qaeda. So it was under controversy that they were, in support of Al Qaeda, merely because it happens to broadcast audio tapes and videos from the group leaders of Al Qaeda. So, but what really irritates the dominant news players is that it presents an alternative perspective of the news, and also they exposes the ground realities of the invasions and the occupations. So we have several Arab nations, they have banned the channel's reporters, Al Jazeera's reporters. Then cable companies in the United States, they have banned it too. But its popularity among Arab communities around the world has grown, to manifold. By mid 2007, its viewership was estimated to have, crossed 40 million that time. So while it's available free in Arab countries, it's a pay channel in North America and Europe. So Al Jazeera they, launched its English channel in the year 2007, and the website is www.aljazeera.net, uh, which was, it was banned in New York when it was first launched, but it's available in Arabic and English versions as well. For Indian viewers, the primetime daily news bulletin of the channel is available on India TV as well. But it's, though it's dubbed in Hindi, the Al Arabiya, it's a satellite called as Al Arabiya, the channel of the Saudi royal family. So it has this channel, it tried to success the win from the Al Jazeera. They tried to take over Al Jazeera view, but Al Arabiya with its headquarters is in London, and now it's in Dubai. But it has very little credibility when in the Arab world when compared to Al Jazeera. Okay. but they compete, with the transnationals in the sale and distribution of footage about the Arab world. They sell it to the Arab countries, but they cannot, succeed the popularity of Al Jazeera. Okay, any doubts? It's clear? Then one of the world's foremost alternative news agencies is the Interpress Service, that is IPS, with its headquarters in Rome. So it has a bureau in New Delhi, besides other capitals of developing countries as well. Okay, so IPS takes a deliberate third world approach to social processes, and it also try to present the news in different angle with different issues, with the issues related to the third world countries. So they have this spot reporting and event and people oriented news, and it concentrates on analytical features, and its major interest is in placing issues in their context to offer discussions on the why aspect of issues rather than the what, when, or where, or who. So it focuses on the why it's happening. Out of the 5W and 1H, they focus on the why aspect of the issue. Okay. So there are now more than 100 news agencies in the world right now, and around 90 countries have their own national news agencies, while 40 countries do not have any agencies at all. So news agencies, in 50 out of the 90 countries are directly under the control of the state, while the remaining 40 are owned and run jointly by the newspapers and the media. Okay. So yet few of them are really autonomous and totally free from political and commercial influences. Like most of them has their own vested interests. Then coming to news agencies in India, K.C. Roy was an Indian journalist during the early years of this century. He, set up the first Indian news agency called the Press News Bureau, that is PNB. Then we have S. Sadanan, established a nationalistic news agencies in the late 1930s, known as the Free Press of India, or FPI, but could not afford to keep it going for more than a couple of years. Then again in the year 1933, the United Press of India, that is UPI, rose out of FPI's ashes. Like FPI was totally backlash, and then UPI proved to be a great success. And then until independence, Reuters and UPI were the main sources of news for Indian newspapers. Because Reuters was a British news agency and UPI is Indian. Yet it was very popular. Then by 1949, the Indian and Eastern Newspaper Society, they started its own agency that is known as the Press Trust of India, the Press Trust of India (PTI), which purchased Reuters. And then while UPI still struggled on, providing little or no competition, again in the year 1958, UPI died a slow death, like leaving PTI alone in the field. With a vast, countrywide teleprinter network and employing more journalists and strangers. So currently PTI is very famous news agency of India. Okay, then we have UNI. Coming to United News of India. See, before long, however, United News of India, it was a competitive news agency. It was set up by Dr. B.C. Roy, right? And it was sponsored by 8 national dailies. Then within a decade, it could, match the services of PTI in the collection and distribution of news. So it now has correspondents in over 200 Indian towns and cities, and around 100 bureaus across the nations. So the various services it offers to its, over 1,000 subscribers in India, and they have 30 abroad as well. And which include Unifin, it's a finance and banking service. Then we have Unistock, it's a service for stock exchanges, and Uniscan, it's a news service, fed directly into television sets. So besides, it has a national photo service also, and it supplies computer design graphics and in ready to use form on economic and other topics. So UNI is also on par with PTI. So Press Trust of India, PTI too has expanded its services considerably and has foreign correspondents in New York, and they have in Moscow, and Kathmandu, Colombo, London, and other world capitals as well. So it employs over 1,000 journalists and technical staff, manning around 100 offices in the country. So its news services have been computerized, and among and the many services it offers to its subscribers are the PTI Stock Scan, in PTI Stocks Scan Elect, PTI Magazine Data India, and a screen-based news service called NewsScan. So it has arrangements with Reuters, AFP, and other news agencies for news, with AP for international photographs, and with for international economic and financial news as well. And PTI has termed up with Information Services of Australia, uh, you know, and with Japan as well, and Antara news agencies of Indonesia, of South Korea, to form a joint venture company to gather and distribute business news on the industrialized economics of the Asia Pacific region. Okay, so it has collaborations with the other countries, and PTI is also the part of a cooperative agreement among 12 news agencies. Okay, for the Asia Pacific region, and for the distribution of corporate and government press releases. Okay, then in March 1998, speculation was right that Dow Jones would tie up with PTI. Dow Jones is a news agency from Japan, so it would tie up with PTI to take on Reuters. But at present, the Dow Jones services are provided by PTI because of government restrictions. Okay, and again against they have restrictions against direct distribution to Indian media houses. So that's why Dow Jones is reportedly helping PTI with technical assistance in its modernization plans. And PTI also distributes the general news service of Reuters in India, but Reuters sells its screen-based business news independently to the press and to business other businesses. And with development loans made available by the central government, the two national news agencies have updated the technology of news reception and news distribution. So towards the end of 1978, UNI and PTI stepped into the age of satellite communication, discarding the outright radio teletype system which was prevailing during before 1978. So thus they began to receive foreign agency and foreign correspondents reports via satellite, and to disseminate agency copying using network computers. Then another landmark in the modernization of the news agencies has been the use of computer and satellite communications for prompt and in-depth analysis of the Lok Sabha and the State Assembly elections since 1980. Okay, this was the first time that news agencies in any developing country had employed computers to report national elections. So while the UNI and PTI have made a great impact in the distribution of national and international news in India, they have yet to tap the interest of many foreign countries, especially of Asia and Africa and Latin America in Indian affairs. So, despite the soaring cost of communications today, the efforts to sell Indian news to the press, radio, and television networks around the world has yet to make a mark. Okay. Because a major vacuum in the Indian news business is the dire absence of Indian language news agencies, that is the regional news agencies. So the total dependence of Indian language newspapers and television news channels on PTI and UNI, and the international news agencies like Reuters, AP, AFP, INS, which disseminate news in English. What they do is they distort the process of selection and reporting of news in the various Indian languages, uh, newspapers or news channels. Because then we have something called as regional PTI regional services like PTI Bhasha and Univarta. They are the Hindi units of PTI and UNI respectively, and they are exceptions to this because they do not distort you know the cultural impediments of these news. They directly have link with this regional varsities. Any doubts here? The PTI Bhasha and Univarta, they are the Hindi units of the two national news agencies of PTI and UNI, right? So until the 1980s, two two Hindi news agencies like the Hindustan Samachar and the Samachar Bharati, they served the Hindi press at that time. So they were bought under one banner during the emergency, for the extensive purpose of starting a national news agencies directly under government control or under government sponsorship. So with the lifting of the emergency, however, Samachar, the label under which the four agencies were merged, it broke into separate constituents again after the emergency was lifted up. So for all practical purposes, Samachar functioned under government control, and the Janta regime, that is the BJP regime, served as a tool of the ruling party, and so they restored the status quo from April 4th, 1978. Okay, so Hindustan Samachar, Hindustan Samachar was India's first multilingual news agencies, and it was founded by S.S. Apte as long as back I dated 1948. So it was the first multilingual news agency. So it sought to educate the masses, to participate in national development, and to strive for national integration through the promotion of all Indian languages. Because after the independence, they wanted to form a separate they wanted to motivate, they wanted to um, make people participate in the overall development process of the nation. So it achieved these aims through the distribution of news among local newspapers. So first, they distributed it through Devanagari telegrams, and then later through Devanagari teleprinters. And then again, by 1975, it has spread its network throughout the length and breadth of the country. So, catering to its subscribers, in as many as 10 Indian languages by the year 1975. So, Samachar Bharati began its operations in the year 1967, supported by the governments of Bihar, Gujarat, Rajasthan, Karnataka, and then they held almost 50% of its shares. Then Jayaprakash Narayan was its first chairman, and then like Hindustan Samachar, though on a much more modest scale, it disseminates news in Indian languages to the vernacular press. Okay, that is the regional press, and then it was wrapped up in the year 1988. Hindustan Samachar and Samachar Bharati was wrapped up in 1988. So this was about the international news agencies and the national regional news agencies. Any doubts? You can unmute and ask if you have any doubt. This was the backdrop of what all we have discussed in the earlier classes. Okay. Yes, anyone? Any doubts? Srinivas, Shanti.
Madam?
Hi, madam. Yeah, go ahead. Shanti,
Yeah.
okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Hello, madam.
Yeah, Shanti. Hi.
How do we understand perfectly or little bit with more understanding in international communication? Can you give some suggestions?
uh, you need further reading, like
Yes, ma'am.
suggestion
Yes.
of book.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. I'll there are some further reading books here
Okay.
uh, at the end of this chapter. Let me.
Okay.
There are suggested readings, right? We have Maxwell's Reader in Mass Communication Theory. Then we
Yes,
have
ma'am.
Mass Communication in India by Keval Kumar.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay, so they
Yeah.
have detailed information about international communication and its backdrop.
Ma'am, we are staying in India, no? Uh, we will
Yeah.
read through books as well as through the media. We learn about the international communication. If we
Hmm.
want to participate in this kind of communication, is there any access us to do such kind of international communication through media, ma'am? How
Yes,
we
yes.
will?
Like we have the social media pages of these international news organizations, like news agencies. Okay,
Okay.
Reuters also they have, for example, they also provide internship opportunities. They have their offices like in almost in India, also in almost all the cities, they have their offices. So we can join as an intern and see how these processes are going on, or else you can directly participate through their social media blogs, social media pages on Facebook.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah. So internship, Reuters also provide internship
Okay, ma'am.
for students. It's a 3 month internship. BBC also provide 3 month internship for students. So
But
they
tell me.
have mm, they assign you know they
Mm,
assign some beats, and then they can allow you to directly participate in the news gathering processes. For example, if you have completed the 3 month internship, they can uh, place you as a foreign correspondent intern also. They have these things in their website. You can directly go to their websites and you can check out their career pages. So there they have all these kind of opportunities where they have this cultural student exchange program as well. For
okay, ma'am.
example, if you want to go to UK, you can go on a visit to cultural exchange on a cultural exchange program, and then uh, another student from UK can come to India, and for a 3 month internship, and then they can learn how they disseminate, how they view the your country's cultural, economic, political issues, how they disseminate the news. You can directly participate. So there are some options you can check out on their
In the
career pages and also on social media pages.
in BBC
Yeah,
website, ma'am.
yeah, BBC website they have. Actually, they had this internship opportunity till last month also, they closed. Then again they have after midsummer.
Ma'am, after getting our journalism MA certificate, then only do we have to apply for this
No, 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 no. You can apply directly with a. You have to get a letter from your university or from your department, and then you can apply directly. It's a student internship program. So as long as you're a student, you can apply. That's not a problem.
Okay,
At
ma'am.
least you should
Thank
have
you, ma'am.
completed your first year. If you are in your second year, also you can apply. You just check out the BBC page for internship. Yeah, they have lot of opportunities. Reuters also have that.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, welcome. Any doubts here? I know it's little, a dry subject, or what we say, little complicated, but this is just a backdrop. In another classes, you'll be able to understand deeply, like what is the exact, nature of this international communication, free and balanced flow of communication, globalize effects of globalization. All these things we'll discuss. This is just a backdrop of the earlier classes which we have discussed in the last 3 or 4 classes.
Thank you, ma'am.
Welcome. Any other doubts? I'll give you other books also, like other suggested readings as well. Srinivas, any doubt?
No, it was clear actually. Thank you.
Oh, okay. In the next class, we'll discuss about globalization and its effect on media and democratization of communication, and other lecture on global flow and the impact of globalization on culture, media, and other factors. Okay, in the next week class. If you have any doubts, you can ping me anytime. Okay. Okay. See you next week then.